to join you. It's a pleasure to be with everyone this morning. My name is Jarrell. I work with the Center for Justice at Columbia University. I came to this work after 6 years incarceration in New York State Prison. I took my first college course in Queensborough Correctional Facility, where I had the privilege of meeting Professor Geraldine Downey, who's a psych professor at Columbia. And she was a part of a pilot program with Assistant District Attorney Lucy Lang, who's now Inspector General for the state. And Lucy and Geraldine partnered up to co-develop and launch first of its kind program that brought prosecutors in the facility to work with incarcerated men to co-create policy solutions for their office. That program was my pathway to Columbia University. I did eventually transfer over to Columbia, earn my bachelor's in 2022, and started a youth program called the Justice Ambassadors Youth Council that was really a replication of the Inside Criminal Justice program. Justice Ambassadors brings policymakers together with 18 to 25-year-olds, some who are court involved, some who are street affiliated, together to co-create policy solutions for city agencies. And we've been running that program since 2019. And one of the proposals, my daughter's singing in the background. One of the policy proposals that was implemented and funded by the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice in the city back in 2020 was a project called Project Restore. And Project Restore was designed as a 18-month gun and gang violence intervention project that was structured as a way for us to work with two rival street crews simultaneously. Hold on one second, yeah. Project Restore was designed as an 18-month gun gang violence intervention. The funding allowed us to work with 15 on one side of the rivalry and 15 on the other side for a total of 30 participants altogether. It began with them working and meeting in separate, neutral, safe spaces, community centers that were in proximity to their housing developments in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. And we provided them with case management, mentorship, life skills programming, internship placements, really wraparound support. The idea of the program was that we would identify leaders from both sides of the conflict, put them through intensive programming for a period of time beyond 8 months. And then after the 8-month mark, using the leaders to come together for reconciliation and community safety agreement between their neighborhood. We were able to achieve that in November of last year. We had 6 leaders from both sides come together. And that's since culminated in them continuing to meet together at Columbia and grow the numbers of what they're calling a community safety working group. So I believe you had a privilege of meeting who's now my colleague, Jason Bostic. But Jason was one of the former participants of the program. He was on one side of the conflict and now is working with us at Columbia. He's also a student, and several others are now taking their first year of college at community college and hoping to transfer over to Columbia at some point. There was more reduction in shootings on one precinct area. So one side of the conflict had a reduction in shootings. And the reason why we learned is that it wasn't just a one-off beef between these two crews, that both crews had interconnected beef with other sections of Brooklyn. So one half of the program participants who we were engaging, they had an ongoing issue with another neighborhood who was retaliating with shootings throughout the program. So there wasn't a reduction in that specific precinct area, but there was a reduction on Jason's neighborhood and amount of shootings for the duration of the project. And it was a full year-long project, so it was enough time for us to actually see the impact and shooting reductions for the year. The program officially concluded in December of last year. And then what we've been doing now is kind of what we're calling a post-program internship at Columbia, and it's an opportunity for us to continue to engage the leaders from both sides of the conflict, and really for them to kind of go through more intensive leadership development training. Our motto at Columbia is to, like Anthony said, make ourselves replaceable. So we want to train up the people who go through our program so that they can become outreach workers, case managers, and so on. And then we have them work with our partner organizations around New York City. But I'm going to leave it there for now. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer. And thank you again for having me.
I'm interested if you pay a living allowance or stipend to the participants.
Yes, we paid them $25 an hour for 20 hours a week, and that $20 that stipend was based on how many sessions they attended weekly. So essentially, our model was we paid them to change their life.
Jarrell, it sounds like your program focuses on leaders of cliques and groups that are influencing other people. And we heard from Lauren that so much of our gun violence seems to be from one-off beefs, interpersonal beefs. Could it be that we're not identifying the more or less group motivated shootings in a way that your program would more directly impact?
Yeah, I think that there's. I'm glad you raised this point too, Scott. It's an important point, and I think that a lot of people don't really focus on this. We wanted to be intentional about the people that we were working with, and it took a lot. It really took 2 years for the program to officially launch because of all the bureaucracy around how we wanted to work with the highest risk population or the most engaged in street conflict. And the way that we framed it, we took the program first to the mayor's office of criminal justice. They agreed to sponsor the project, but then we wanted to work in partnership with the Kings County District Attorney's Office. And the reason why is because the Kings County District Attorney's Office is leading these massive investigations that conclude in mass arrests. So they're doing what we call these sweeps, these gang takedowns around the city. And they in their mind, it's an effective public safety strategy. It does reduce violence immediately, but then it picks back up in the months that follow following an indictment. So what we did was we had a couple of meetings with the DA's office and said, rather than rather than tracking incidents that are occurring during the course of an investigative period, allow us to descend into the community with program providers and resources and cultivate the leadership qualities of those folks who are on the front lines of gun violence. And if we can successfully transform their life, it'll have a ripple effect on the community, their peers, their families, and so on in those neighborhoods. Now, that's the way that we really designed it. We asked the DA's office to give us a full name of the people who are on their watch list. These are people who are in the New York City Police Department's gang database system, who are identified within in crews that operated within that district zip code in that area of Bed-Stuy. So they basically looked in the database, looked to see what crews operated within the vicinity where we wanted to roll out the project. But they took it a step further because the DA's office wanted us, they selected the area of Brooklyn where they wanted us to launch the pilot project at. They chose Bed-Stuy because there was enough infrastructure and organizational support in the area. And it was also one of the hotspot areas of Brooklyn where they wanted to launch a pilot. So they gave us a list of names, 30 people. We then went out to community organizations in the ground that have relationships, pretty much cure violence organizations who have relationships with some of the guys. And then we partnered with them so that they can come together to help us do the outreach and recruitment. The way that we framed it to the participants on the ground, we didn't say it was a violence prevention initiative. We said it was a workforce readiness opportunity, and that we would pay them to go through the skills building process to get jobs at the end of it. And after the halfway mark, before we brought the leaders together, then we revealed the full scope of the program, that we have been engaging folks from both sides, and that both crews were receiving equal services and program. Now, the challenge in all of that is that we would lead in this program into housing developments. If you know New York City, those are large, structures that have over 1,000 units in it. So really, the number of people we were engaging was a small subset of the actual number of their crew sizes. We only had money to pay 30 people in total, but the ripple effect that the program was having was causing them to bring their friends, bring their peers. So we eventually had to apply for a supplemental grant just to pay the additional 20 people who came onto the project after we officially started. So the full number we concluded with was around 50 participants who went through the program, some who joined later on, and the 30 that we originally began with. Sorry for that long-winded answer, Scott.
Kendall has his hand up. Thank you.
I think his had been up from earlier.
Oh, sorry. I meant to put that down. Sorry about that.
All right, Larry.
Yeah, just a question for Jarrell. And it's on terminology. When you refer to crews, I assume you're referring to what us older folks might think of as gangs. Is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you for that too, Larry. I use that distinction between terminology because New York City muddies the waters when they talk about gangs and street crews. So I know from lived experience, I was a member of the Bloods, and I was also a member of my neighborhood street crew. I was indicted on a gang charges in 2012 for my affiliation with the neighborhood street crew, not for my affiliation with the Bloods. Now, the issue with that is that when they use this kind of terminology, it assumes that, and it's really the justification for conspiracy charges when they say gang rather than crew, because gang has more legitimacy in the eyes of the media and politicians. But when they use gang, it assumes that we're operating under this type of structured organization. Like gangs have an initiation process, a hierarchy, a chain of command, an oath that people are sworn into. But that isn't true for local neighborhood street crews. It's based on geographical place of residence. There is no hierarchy. There is no initiation process. So when we charge people with conspiracy charges, it kind of trumps up or gives them more credit for something that they don't really, the structure that they don't have. The other distinction that's important between the terminology is that the street crews are mostly ran and dominated by emerging adults, young people who are either, early teens, late teens, or young adults, 18 to 25. For the most part, you won't really see an older population who's still claiming affiliation to a neighborhood street crew, whereas that's different for folks who are actually affiliated with a sanctioned gang that has chapters around the country. So that distinction is really important in our advocacy work that we do in the city, because it gets us to delegitimize like what law enforcement is calling as a gang when it's actually not a gang. And in the same, when those folks do end up incarcerated, jurors and judges and prosecutors, when they're hearing the terminology, they're also assuming that this is a violent, vicious, well-organized entity, when it's in fact the opposite. These are teenagers who didn't go home for a couple of days and need crisis counseling and need support, and they're not operating as if they're inchangeable. Yeah.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
The idea of leadership development is something that we heard from Jason and now from you, and it's not something that we've thought of. I haven't considered to be part of our GVRS program. Can you say more about what leadership development looks like when you're talking to leaders of crews and potentially gangs?
Yeah, I'll give you an insight into one of the sessions. I led a session with them early on in the program around the impact that the Black Panther Party had on the country. Now, the reason why I thought it was important for them to learn about this part of history was, one, it was culturally relevant for their own identity, but two, we don't ignore the fact that they're already leaders. So regardless of what government might feel or community organizations might feel, we acknowledge the fact that they're leaders and within the crews that they're affiliated with. We targeted active shooters. We targeted the people who were either likely to be shot or likely to do a shooting. So in that philosophy, we know that we're working with people who have some type of neighborhood influence. Whether they're leaders or not, they have some type of influence. So we wanted to, build those skill sets and change the trajectory. Some of the responses we got in our, midpoint interviews and closeout interviews was that they were looking to have an identity, be recognized and be respected, whether it was a legitimate identity or the one that they, kind of live up to from the movies that what they watch. But what was important for us to do is to show them how they could continue to be a leader just in a healthy and positive way. How could they galvanize folks in their neighborhood to do toy drives, to do anti-gun violence rallies, to organize and rally in front of, City Hall for funding for programming support. We told them that they had the power to bring people outside of their homes if there was an issue in the neighborhood. If someone caused harm to someone, people could make a call and galvanize 20, 30, maybe 50 people. We wanted them to use that same organizing power to bring people together for the greater good of their neighborhoods. But the first thing we had to do is kind of build their awareness around what's happening structurally, systematically. We wanted them to know that historically, since the 90s, there's been a poverty deficit in this specific zip code in one of the wealthiest cities in the country, right? And that's an issue. If people from Brownsville and Bed-Stuy have been the poorest since the 90s and one of the richest cities in the country, then we need to address the issue. But part of what we do, we don't want to, me personally, we don't want young people who grow up stigmatized, rejected, and marginalized to feel like that they're getting confirmation that the system is against them. We want them to be aware that there are obstacles, that there are disparities in outcomes in policing and incarceration rates, but we want them to be charged with playing a role and changing that, right? So the leadership comes out and us telling them that yes, system is not functioning the way that we want it to right now, but every time a shot goes off in this neighborhood, we justify the policy response that increases police presence in the area, right? So we want to build their awareness so that they understand that you have the power to tell someone, this is an impulsive response that I'm going to give to a situation that's going to have a greater cost benefit or cost risk for our neighborhood and the types of investments that corporations, that government want to make in this specific zip code. So I use a lot of my own lived experiences in some of the sessions to show them like really what's possible. Someone who was gang involved, incarcerated, now educated, now leading a program, now is somewhat successful. And I show them that this is a pathway that you can obtain for yourself. It's not far-fetched. I'm still relatively close in age with you, and that you can actually emerge and to be the leader that you want and build a real legacy. They talk a lot about that in the interviews. It's like they want to have a legacy, whether it's a good legacy or a bad legacy, they want to be remembered for doing something. So we want to fuel that need for being remembered for doing something, but we want to reorient the way that they're thinking about leaving a legacy behind and give them the skills so that they can succeed in adult life. So we're going beyond the program, the typical program model. We're not just giving you case management, life skills, and mentorship. We're actually helping you set up a bank account. We're talking to you about the importance of establishing and maintaining good credit. We're talking to you about if you want to pursue an entrepreneurship pathway, what are the different means that you need to do that? How do you sustain a business? Thinking about workplace culture. And then if you want to be a business owner, well, maybe you need to learn on your emotional temperament first. So how can we do these workplace scenarios so that you can build a better understanding of how do you navigate workplace scenarios? How do you process and understand grief and traumatic events that occur, or just being denied and rejected, losing a job, right? So we want them to have these kind of soft skills that we think will kind of make them stronger candidates for the workforce, but also help them understand what does it take to kind of stay in this kind of space in society where we're not being, again, pushed back to the margins.
Jarrell, Tom Vandevender from St. Luke's, really impressed. Can you speak to, are you knowledgeable enough about what we're trying to do in Indianapolis to compare it with what you're trying to do in Brooklyn neighborhoods? Understanding, you know, the huge difference in every respect actually between those two environments. Can you speak to that, or are you aware enough of what we're trying to do in Indy?
I caught a little bit of it from Anthony. He came up and visited us. He met with a couple of our graduates. Anthony actually got a chance to meet with some of the leaders from both sides who agreed to meet together and work together. He told me he was working with you all on trying to build out a similar approach. I think that I think part of why I'm here today is to talk about how we kind of design this type of intervention model and you know, kind of build from there. So I'm not fully versed in it, but I do understand that you want to build a similar kind of approach to disrupting street conflict at its roots.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Cecilia Dotson, and I'm with the Neighborhood Association. I'm just fascinated, and I'm also recognizing how much I don't know. And I'm out here moving and shaking with a lot of the other community advisors, and if I don't know, then most of the people in the city doesn't know. And I am so impressed with what you have done and you know what you are doing. I think if we, and I'm impressed with the things that are happening with here in our own city, but I do think part of the problem is we need more education in the community. People like myself, we don't know your terminology. We don't, the difference in a gang and a crew and those type of things. We can't even speak your language. So I think if we could do more of that, I think we have the people in place to do some of the things that you're doing there. And they're already in place. But I think that in order to get the community involved, we are going to have more information ourselves. And if they are excited about it as I am, and just
Muted yourself, Cecilia.
yeah, I talk with my hands, so so anyway, I'm just saying that if we can get our neighborhoods and those people who are really working in our community, if we can better inform them of the terminology, maybe IMPD can set up conferences or something. I think we need the community home base itself needs more information. They would be more apt to help. And I think we would really move forward if we could do that. And that's just my opinion, but I know now I want to really, really help. I thought I wanted to help before, but now it's even more so because I'm learning more about what's going on.
Jarrell, didn't you all do something with the seniors in your program?
Can you say that one more time, Anthony?
Do I remember you all reported out that you all did some community events or activities with the elders in the community?
Yeah, we've been holding what we call community focus groups, kind of just trying to assess the the ripple effect of this type of intervention on the community. Has it changed perceptions and attitudes community members had about the young people in the neighborhood? Has it helped to reconnect or reestablish the ties between the older generation and the younger generation in the neighborhood? And then as our spaces becoming more accessible for young people. There's a church in I'll use Jason's neighborhood as an example. Jason had, and most of the guys we worked with in the program had never been inside the church that literally is across the street from their housing development. And the reason why is because the church owner assumed that because they were, outside on the corner that they would kind of cause harm or ruckus inside of the church. So it wasn't until we partnered with the church on the project and started hosting sessions inside the church that they actually got to see that these young people do care about their future. They actually do have aspirations. They had just never seen or had examples or models to kind of follow behind or emulate. So that was the reason why we wanted to do these focus groups to kind of hear some of the feedback that the community had about the program, kind of give them a chance to talk about what they hope for future directions of the program going forward, and then also for them to kind of hear from the guys firsthand, give them a chance to tell their side of the story rather than what the news and media and the clergy council has been saying about them.
Crystal?
I don't even know where to begin because this is just amazing. So let me first and foremost say thank you for your work. Thank you for everything that you are pouring in. I have a question. I am in the sector with the youth. I serve on our local school board and do a bunch of stuff. But I say all that to say, does your group, are you in any schools? Do you partner with any schools? Because we know that traumatized children can turn into traumatized adults. And that, so yeah, do you have any partnerships that you do with schools? And if you do, what does that look like on kind of bridging your program with the school?
So that's a great question. So I'm just going to answer it first and then give context. We're not working with the schools only because this project was funded as a 18-month demonstration project, pilot program essentially, and it was designed for us to work in the community with community-based organizations with specific 18 plus. So none of the folks who were in the program were still in high school or Yeah, so they weren't in high school. But what we did learn is from, especially from the guys who went through this first cohort, we learned that the shooters' ages are getting younger. And that they wanted us, this is what they gave us as programmatic feedback. They wanted us to work with the 14 to 17-year-olds who were in high school, who were the ones who were, trolling the most on social media, instigating the rivalries through online content. And they wanted us to engage them. It was just the way that the program was launched as a pilot program. We didn't have capacity to go inside of the schools, but it is something we wrote up in our final report for future directions on the project and what we hope for.
Yeah, I just want to share. This is Tim Nation. I work at Peace Learning Center here in Indianapolis, and we are working at Arsenal Tech High School. The question about high schools and this a similar type of program, but under 18. I do think we have a couple kids who might be 19, who are seniors in the program. But we identified the leaders by going to the school and asking about kids who have been in trouble with juvenile justice and with suspensions and expulsions, but showed leadership skills. And we identified 16 kids that went through a 4-part program and provided living allowances like we're talking about, and other opportunities for leadership and service. And one of the things that happened is the principal commented one of the kids had been threatening violence, not in the program, but another kid that had been sent to the dean's office. And 3 of the kids that were in this program went to him to talk him down because of, they realized that, you don't want to play those games, and it's had a really big impact. A couple of kids are going to college this year who may have ended up someplace else. I think this is, but just like Kendall says, we need to focus 1835, but I have to say, it's these 14 to 17-year-olds who are carrying guns and beginning on this path. You got to be careful when you're going to school, but once you're out of school, and once you get pushed out of school, that's when we have homicides and violence and those sorts of things. So I think all we can do, and we back that up with restorative justice too, to keep kids from being suspended and expelled, and also to, Boys and Girls Club, Reach for Youth Voices, and a number of programs in this community, including Anthony's, do this case management, working with kids, and really getting great results. So I just want to throw that in, and I appreciate the opportunity. And also, I really like this model that you're talking about because it's neighborhood based, and we need more of this.
Thank you, Tim. Jerry?
Yeah, thanks. I think actually my question maybe is addressed to Anthony and Kendall. Thank you, Jarrell. This has been really, you can tell from the response here, this has just been really important and stimulating to all of us. I am trying to assess from this discussion, trying to assess what to make of this discussion. Do we think that we are going to follow through in Indianapolis to learn more about the model, to try and implement it? Tim just said that in some ways Peace Learning Center is already adopting the certain aspects of the program, I guess is what I think Tim said. But are we thinking of adding to the gun violence reduction strategy and effort to do the kind of work that Jarrell has been describing to us, or where are we with this? Is this exploratory or intentional?
Well, Jerry, thank you for the question. I thought it was important to bring Jarrell on because, number one, just his extraordinary story of, being incarcerated and coming out and starting up a program, and now has his degree at Columbia. And I think, are you going for your master's or doctorate now?
Yeah, next week is my start on my PhD journey.
Yeah, and 29 years old. 29 years old. And so we're throwing away a lot of talent by just, putting kids in jail and throwing away the key. And so we got to address that issue. The other thing I wanted us to hear, those of us that know the GVR strategy, there's a lot of similarities. But I think the difference with Jarrell's program is they went really deep on leadership and the conflict, and then bringing those guys together to use those skills against with one another. And he went deep with those individuals. And so I bring that point up to say the fidelity of his model is very important, which is the same with the GVRS strategy or any model. If you don't carry it out with full fidelity, then you're not going to get the results that you desire to get. And so Jarrell and his team put together a model, and the fidelity of it was just, I mean, when I saw and I heard and I talked to everybody on this team, they went deep. It wasn't a checkbox experience. And so one of the people that I hope people heard that in his presentation. The other piece, Jerry, is I think in Indianapolis, and you've heard us talk about this, we definitely need an advisory council that can help support our city in moving forward with the GVR strategy and to help sustain it. Because now I know the funding is about to go back to $3, $4, $5 million when we were at 15 million a year doing the opera dollars. And we don't want to be like Oakland, where they got great success, 6, 7, 8 year run, and then they took the dollars away, and then the gun violence shot back up again. So now they're trying to reestablish the level of engagement that they had before. Does that answer your question, Jerry?
Yeah, and I'm gonna take advantage. You open the door, Anthony, to talk about the Community Advisory Council. So you probably will understand that I'm going to walk through that door. I just can't tell you how supportive I am that CURV should continue its leadership to form that advisory council. And so might we expect then that the kind of effort that Jarrell has been describing for us this morning, might we expect that kind of initiative could be part of an advisory council's communication to the mayor?
Say that one more time. Might we expect what?
Well, can we expect that an advisory council would continue to discuss the program the programming that we've been talking about this morning, and to discuss that in a way to put forward some recommendations to the city?
Sure.
And Anthony, I'll just jump in and say that before Cameron goes, I'll say that we're happy to come out and to kind of present the model. We do have a slide deck. We do have the final report. I'm also going to be evaluating the intervention's long-term impact while I'm in school. So there'll be more publications coming out about the model. It's also important to say in this conversation that the city is going to expand different cohorts of the program in the Bronx and another section of Brooklyn. So there will be more of the model being done. But just again, this is a pilot, so it is the first time a city has done this type of approach to violence prevention. The CURV violence model has been here for years. The city has mixed reviews about the impact that it's had, and this is why they chose to invest in this type of approach rather than this traditional intervention model.
Karen?
Hi, thank you, Jarrell, so much for all you've done and all you've shared. I guess a couple of questions is, I heard you talk about meeting with the elders in that specific neighborhood. I'm curious about how you see broad community support playing a role. And then, oh gosh, I lost the other part of it, what I was going to say. Shoot. So scaling this project, my concern, one of the things is that targeted very deep is easy to do once, but trying to do that in multiple places, having enough resources of the kind you need to be able to do that broadly, I think that's a struggle for any city, is to have enough of the really outstanding resources that it takes to really dive in with these folks. And I don't know if you guys have talked about how to scale that at all. So scaling it and broad community support, how that works for you guys.
Yeah, I'll start with the broad community support. So we partnered with there was at least about 10 organizations involved in this project. So there was both sides of the violence, Bridge Street. So both sides of the violence, Cure Violence, Man Up Incorporated, Cure Violence, SOS, Cure Violence. And then we had community-based organizations that do full range of services. Bridge Street Corporation Development was one of them. Inside Circle was another. And then we had government partners from the mayor's office to the police department to the district attorneys. And then other agencies knew about the project, so it expedited service connections for our participants. For example, a month after the project started, a participant was shot. We needed to do emergency relocation. That in New York City, that can take you months to have any type of housing traction. Because the mayor's office was partnering on a project, he was moved in a few hours out of his neighborhood to a safer location. So those kind of partnerships were really important for, again, like service connection and expedition of services for participants. And there were a range of program providers who were on the project. Each program provider who had a formal role on the project was contracted to do an area of work. So for example, the Center for Justice at Columbia was contracted to do monitoring and evaluation, and to also lead the life skills sessions one day of the week for both sides of the conflict. Inside Circle was contracted to do restorative justice and healing circles. Bridge Street was contracted to do the onboarding of staff, to put the 30 participants on payroll for the full year. So each organization was contracted to do some area of work for the project, and they were compensated for that. The total price tag for the project was $2.5 million. In all honesty, that full $2.5 million wasn't used. There was expenditure that wasn't, deadline that wasn't met. So some of the money got cut off at the end of the project. But altogether, there was probably about 1.9 used from the full budget for the project. In terms of scaling the project, I think for us, Karen, is we're in a better position in New York City to do it because the city is made up of many cities. So, each borough essentially has enough funds to do its own thing within New York City as a whole. So, and when we talk about going to the Bronx, it's really just having a commitment from the government agencies that they agree to partner on the project. That's the biggest piece to this whole thing. The money doesn't need to come from government at all. It could come from philanthropic dollars, could come from corporate sector, could come from grassroots fundraising in the community. I think that the biggest piece is really the service connection. So things are gonna happen. We anticipated things would happen. We knew people would still be shot while the program was happening. We knew people would be arrested for firearm possession. We needed our government partners to understand that going into the project. So that took some separate meetings and convenes and talks and presentations, and to Laura's point, having them understand human development and psychology so that they're not, going to their comfort zone, which is a law enforcement approach. And things did happen as we anticipated, and we did have those check-ins with them so that they continue to believe and trust the process of the program until we've had the solid outcomes at the end of the road. So again, I'll just say, like, it can be done with a cheaper number, and it can be done with a different approach. And I say this because they asked me to be a part of this Project Restore pilot because I was a part of something similar in a smaller capacity in Brownsville, Brooklyn, with 10 rival crew members, 5 from both sides. And these are what the Woos and Chos in Brownsville, Brooklyn. Now, the approach with that project was completely different because we spoke with all of the leaders first and then paid them to have their first session together. So it wasn't like Project Restore where they met separately for 8 months, got skills building opportunities, and then brought together. The Brownsville project, they started off from day one meeting together. So it was breaking the ice, building comfortability amongst each other. So I just say that as an example. There's different ways to approach the type of intervention, but I like the later version, the way we did it with Project Restore, because we want to, and I know this from firsthand experience, when someone dies in street conflict, people hold on to that really dearly. Some people never get over it. Some people will make it their identity to avenge the person who was lost. So it's a more, it's more like, being mindful of that rather than forcing people to come together who haven't had a chance to go through their own transformative experience separately before coming together with someone who's caused that kind of harm. So I just wanted to throw that out there too. But to your point, Karen, I think that for us, we're in a unique position where we can relatively scale this up. It's really just where the funding will be placed. And because New York City has a large operating budget because of our resident capacity, the state also kicks in a lot of anti-gun violence funding that trickles through the city mayor's office and down into the organizations doing the meaningful work.
Thank you. Thank you for your insights. That's excellent points. I appreciate it.
Well,
I think
Jarrell, thank you
Alex.
for coming on and Aaron. I really appreciate it. I'm super proud of you and the work that you're doing, and I pray God's blessing over your life that you continue in this work and continue to impact the young people. To be 29 years old and have